We went in that morning, really not knowing what type of enemy force to expect. What we met was anywhere between 600 to 1,000 of Saddam's best fighters, his Fedayeen. We are going to the extended family palace of Saddam and his sons on the north side of Baghdad, Iraq. I was part of a Special Forces ODA. I was acting as a sniper, intelligence sergeant, and also as a human intelligence operative. Next to me in the truck was Willie Hemingway, an absolute living legend in Special Forces. We had an intel analyst stacked up in the back of the open truck, completely exposed the entire time. There were 2 military branches, other government agencies. We were all on different radio frequencies. It felt like at no time there was a central command. Essentially, we were going into blind territory. Just before daybreak, I looked to my right across the vehicle past Willie into the darkness. Heavy machine gun fire, RPG fire, and grenades. A well-known gunnery sergeant in that battalion had just been killed in action. The communications had gone to crap with all the smoke from the enemy rounds. In that moment, that's when I realized that we might have a technology problem. And it is often the technology that can tip the scales in a fight like that. We got through a very bad, volatile, and violent situation. We didn't accomplish the mission, but that day has stayed with me for a long time.
And you will have every tool you need to carry out your duty.
New technology is increasingly arriving on the battlefield.
Every military across time has sought to increase the performance of individual soldiers.
Machines have been killing people on their own for a while.
How do you mentally and physically prepare a soldier for what is to come?
As war and weaponry have evolved, armor and hardware have raced to keep up. Preserving soldiers' lives is job number one, but there has always been a compromise between protection and practicality. Each war raises equipment challenges to be met in the next war, and battlefield tested by the next generation of soldiers.
Counter to what many people believe, humanity wasn't born as a species to be violent to one another. Modern contemporary archaeologists tell us that there were societies and communities that were able to live peaceably together. Now, at some stage, and it's well before a written history of humanity, we did start to see humanity become violent. And this is the point at which humanity becomes more interesting.
So in Stanley Kubrick's film 2001: Space Odyssey, you saw in the beginning a hominin was able to use tools to basically provide for itself, but those same tools were also very quickly used as a weapon.
After the first hominin is killed, The remainder of his tribe run away scared. It's an example of the psychological power that an individual with a superior weapon can have.
Was that just plain bad luck, or is it human nature? I guess we may never know.
Before the wheel came along, we were more interested as a species in trying to kill other things than we were in transportation, for example.
Humans are, by nature, problem solvers. And once the problem of hunting was settled, the next problem became other humans.
Weapons to aid hunting, to cause damage and to kill, have been part of every piece of archaeology. We know that they've constructed spears, knives, flint, bone. They've always been about the neatest, quickest, most effective and efficient way to kill without being injured yourself. Now that has caused a series of innovations to weapons that prioritize things like lethality, speed and precision. With the creation of the bow and arrow. Both archaeological findings as well as cave paintings and bone analysis show that it became the weapon of choice in armed confrontations between humans. We see the sword, which is a weapon that is not designed for hunting, it is designed for combat. Now, this is a really important moment, as well as it starts to be the sort of recorded moment of a written history of humanity, usually described through terms of warfare and battle, whether it's in the East with Sun Tzu or through Thucydides and Herodotus in Europe.
There have been many moments of change in warfare and military technology. One of the earliest was, in fact, the invention or discovery of metal and metalworking, because then humans started to make tools out of metal and pretty much immediately also weapons out of metal. And that gave humans new capabilities to kill and injure each other.
Improvements in metallurgy meant weapons could be produced in bulk. And once they were produced in bulk, more and more armies were able to have the same weapons. This led to the difference on the battlefield being made in tactics and training. That led to the dominance of Alexander the Great and later the great Roman Empire.
And that kind of fighting, where it became professionalized, became a very different way of using technology and weapons. They became specialized for fighting with your colleagues, not just to protect yourself, to protect your comrades around you.
I think one way to look at it is a lot of these leaps came from what was the energy source. If you're just like using a big stick to beat somebody up, you're using your own muscle energy, and that still exists in warfare. At some point, we start domesticating animals, so we don't just use animals for transportation. War elephants are literally using the elephant as a weapon. But that's how things were for rather a long time.
We could categorize weapons into 4 sets of characteristics: damage or lethality, distance, the precision with which you can deliver it, and finally the sort of repeatability, the rate of fire that you can achieve out of it. Let's start with lethality. The one thing that you want to be able to do when you're in a fight is to put your adversary down permanently. That developed in a evolution as protection was added to each combatant. The second part of it is distance, how far you can reach.
One of the early game changers was the invention of the longbow. The longbow kind of served like artillery before we ever had explosives. It enabled an army to employ people at a standoff distance where they're not right up on the front line, but still rain down lethality from the sky.
The third characteristic has always been precision. The problem with firing bows and arrows is so many of them miss. Tools like the Greek ballista, or its smaller version, the crossbow, allowed you to hit individuals more accurately, and to use less training to hit people was really important. The fourth aspect of this is your repeatability, the rate of fire. Your ability to launch not just one arrow, but 4 arrows a minute. Your ability to use not just one ballista, but multiple ballistas. Your ability to launch a huge number of missiles or attacks against an adversary. The ability to hone and draw together these characteristics on the field of battle determined the victor at the end of the day.
Bows and ballistas were effective, but warfare entered a new, explosive era, when weapons no longer depended on physical power.
The Chinese alchemists who were able to mix the black powder and harness gunpowder's explosive energy using a metal tube gave birth to the first firearms.
All of a sudden, you get a big bang out of some gunpowder. In the old days, it was as far as you could throw a spear, shoot an arrow, and that was the natural limit of it. If all of a sudden you can start shooting something for longer than you can fire an arrow, then the scale of things changes.
The first cannons and mortars were not accurate, but the advantage was they could be used against hardened targets, and their use caused panic in the ranks of the enemy. Their lethality was increased when we started using shells propelled by explosive charges, and the shells were capable of producing shrapnel.
It was going to be really in the 19th century where modern guns, as we'd understand them today, began to develop. The invention of the cartridge, which reduced the loading time. The first repeating systems like the Winchester and Henry rifles alongside revolver handguns in the 1830s increased the rate of fire and made distant combat and accuracy more frequent. But the biggest invention that we would record today would be the arrival of machine guns introduced during the American Civil War.
Later, the machine gun became the backbone of military defenses. One machine gun, properly placed, could produce a river of lethal fire covering the entire defensive flank. The machine gun's use enabled infantry units to repel large attacks from much larger forces.
Then you start taking fossil fuels or wood and turning them into steam or using them more directly in internal combustion engines. And if all of a sudden an army moves faster than it can on foot or on horseback because of use of energy, the scale of everything becomes bigger because of ranges. Well, transportation ranges and ranges of lethality. Once warfare gets so big that you're doing things at a greater distance, so all of a sudden, you can coordinate a bigger mass of military force spread out over a bigger area and affecting a bigger area. So that changed modern warfare.
Research has shown that the most revolutionary changes came out of new ways of using a new technology. The most typical example of this is the tank. The tank entered the battlefield already in 1916. But it took until the Second World War and the development of a new doctrine that really allowed the tank to be used to its full potential.
The technology changes. The battlefield expands. But the fundamentals of war stay the same.
It's about how you understand how to fight your adversary. That interaction between weapons, between the attacker and the defender, remains as much a factor today in modern weapons as it did back for our ancestors 60,000 years ago. It's not about bravery or courage. It's not about an equal or a fair fight. They've always been about the neatest, quickest, most effective and efficient way to kill without being injured yourself.
Developing skill sets and weapons that can carry out more spectacular attacks.
Overall, this vehicle is a leap.
Building the United States Army of tomorrow.
Holographic quantum memory for future Army quantum networks.
This is the next generation of military weapon systems.
The digital age is reshaping almost every aspect of modern warfare. Equipment, weaponry, intelligence gathering, and even the individual soldier.
New technology is increasingly arriving on the battlefield, and that is greatly changing the way the average soldier fights. If we continue the trend of warfare over the last 20 years, we will continue to see the move towards more technology and a more technologically advanced soldier on the battlefield. These technologically enhanced soldiers, looking somewhat like a robot, will each be able to identify, isolate, and kill a target. This new generation of super soldier will look like something right out of a video game.
So as a smart soldier evolves here in the 21st century, there's going to be 4 areas that are going to come together to enhance and enact this change. First is offensive, which is obviously the development of weapon systems and weapon platforms that the soldier can command and control on the battlefield.
The second thing that we need to think about, that's the idea of armor, of protection, but it also includes deception, it includes movement, it includes maneuver, it includes camouflage.
The other 2 areas are going to be understanding and having situational awareness, having the ability to synthesize, gather, analyze, and use vast amounts of data. And the last part of it is, before you even get into combat, how do you mentally and physically prepare a soldier for what is to come?
We're always making and using weapons that people and agencies say that will be the next best thing. But the truth is, we're still using firearms that send projectiles out that we've been using for hundreds of years.
An important development in warfare over the last decades is the increase in precision that weapons can achieve, and also the increase in firepower that is now possible thanks to technological advances. So weapons can hit their targets in a more precise way, helping to minimize civilian casualties, and less soldiers are needed in order to achieve the same level of firepower.
Contributed to the urban warfare.
Result of the latest aerial bombardment.
As the smoke clears, the casualties appear.
Greater precision has become crucial as warfare has moved from battlefields to populated urban areas.
Over the last few decades, urban warfare has become prevalent in our conflicts. And urban warfare comes with its own unique challenges. A key advantage would be the development of weapons that give you a standoff where you do not have to expose yourself to fire in order to engage the enemy.
During the Second World War, the Germans introduced the Krummlauf, or the curved barrel, that would allow people to shoot around corners. This idea was first developed during the First World War when soldiers wanted periscopes and used periscope attachments in order to fire from their trenches. In the early 2000s, this was in many ways perfected by the Israeli Defense Force, who designed the corner shot, a regular gun and small digital camera mounted on the front end, while the shooter aimed by a video display.
Now, instead of a soldier having to peek around the corner to identify a target, they can actually use a weapon that's meant to bend around a hard object to get a line of sight on a target or a door or a passageway without having to actually expose a soldier. India, China, and others are developing this kind of technology as well.
The biggest advancement in the next 20 years will be directed energy weapons. PHASAR stands for the Personnel Halting and Stimulation Response Rifle. That is a prototype of a non-lethal laser. Its purpose is to temporarily impair aggressors by disorienting and blinding them with the laser light that the rifle emits. I think an advantage of the PHASAR rifle is that it allows you to incapacitate an enemy instead of having to kill them.
In the future, with a new class of firearms, a new class of weapons, they will be the most technologically advanced and allow for the smallest signature either attached or on the soldier.
We will see directed energy weapons on the battlefield very soon. They'll initially combat drones and missiles and will change warfare and perhaps ultimately reduce cost.
The next evolution is to take that weapon out of the soldier's hand.
You will have every tool you need to carry out your duty.
Ordinary soldiers were left exposed without the most basic means of fighting war. Equipment shortages were so serious for some that even serving soldiers have been prepared to tour.
I didn't realize until the next morning, until we got back to Bagram, that the bullet was actually in my vest.
We had 5 rounds each to defend ourselves.
Just 5 rounds for a 5-month tour, 1 bullet per month.
More powerful, smarter weapons mean more powerful, smarter gear to protect soldiers. But even the best gear is useless if it hinders readiness, forcing soldiers like JD to make tough life and death choices.
Back on April 10th, 2003, I feel the fundamental issue could have been lack of good ballistic body armor. Willie and I didn't wear our helmets and body armor because it was just too cumbersome getting in and out of the vehicle, running the radios, and especially running that gun and reloading that gun.
If you look at pictures of me from Afghanistan, I was old school and shied away from wearing too much equipment in favor of more mobility. Back then, the U.S. Army's improved outer tactical vests could weigh almost 30 pounds. And by the time you added weapons, batteries, supplies, and other gear, you were easily carrying up to or over 100 pounds. If you're wearing a lot of heavy and cumbersome equipment, it becomes almost impossible to maneuver under fire. And in my view, that can get you killed.
There's always a guy with a spreadsheet and a PowerPoint slide somewhere. Well, a soldier needs this, a soldier needs that. And it sort of adds up to a huge burden on the soldier.
Here again, technological advances such as in nanotechnology and new materials can help to make armor lighter and more effective, less cumbersome, and thus improve the ability of a soldier to survive injuries or survive being attacked.
The most important facet of this body armor is that it's not only designed to catch the bullet, but it also disperse its kinetic energy, both to avoid damage and minimize the backwards projection caused by the impact, which could also have lethal consequences for the soldier.
In some cases, that armor is modular, which means the soldier or the operator can layer on the necessary pieces of armor that he or she needs, depending on the conflict or the battle they're going into.
We have far more amputations now than we did at one point because the armor is very good at protecting the core and keeping a guy alive, but his limbs are mangled.
One thing that probably has saved more soldiers' lives than any improvement in armor or fortification is medicine, emergency medicine in particular. In the past, most soldiers didn't die on the battlefield itself, but rather later on. They died from infection and diseases. So an injury that in the past might have killed you eventually, today might keep you from the battlefield just for a few days or a few weeks.
The goal, of course, is to avoid getting injured at all. That demands not just better armor, but better intelligence gathering and communication to evade the enemy, or to gain the upper hand.
Let me go back to 1987 when I joined the Army. Your combat radio, it was one per platoon, so there'd be 30 guys, 40 guys in one radio. And this radio was 20 pounds. And you're talking a handset. It was literally the same kind of backpack radio that you saw in the Vietnam films.
Throughout the Iraq War and the Afghan War, you saw the introduction of various technology elements into the hands of the operator. Night vision goggles allows the operator to see at night, but it has some significant downfalls because it does not work in certain environments when there's smog, if there's a flash of lights. What you're starting to see now are tools that allow the operator to see through infrared, which allows it to function in all types of ambient environments.
I'm aware of the goggles and some of the devices that help bring the smart battlefield to the soldier and then push his information out to others. Going into Iraq with the Marines, we just didn't have the technology available to us. And it definitely came to light during the morning of the 10th as we got ambushed. I think we could have used some better thermals, some better night vision, because obviously we did not have a clear picture just before dawn of what lay in wait for us. I feel we had aerial coverage, aerial intelligence, but back in 2003, we could not tie that information into the battlefield and then push that information around the battlefield. On the morning of April 10th, 2003, I feel that type of technology would have been very critical to our mission. Maybe there would still be some Marines alive.
Basically, I'm here to announce that we're building Iron Man.
How about Superman-like X-ray vision in the form of goggles for soldiers? Army scientists created a new material that rejects the sand particles, saving the blades and keeping future soldiers safe.
Battlefield gear has leapt forward in the last 20 years. Advances such as integrated communication and augmented vision systems, strength-enhancing exoskeleton suits, and unmanned rifles are in development or already in place.
In May 2013, the US Army announced Talos, the Tactical Assault Light Operator Suit, was under development.
As we're adding technology to the current soldier on the battlefield, I feel there could be augmentation and improvement to the human body. I can't wait to see the first exoskeletons on soldiers. I feel that enhancement is going to be safe for infantry guys.
Some soldiers are already being equipped with small portable devices that link them back to their headquarters and commanders, enabling a two-way flow of information. Not just the soldier's view of the battlefield, but also the commander's view, enabling the commander to send instructions and targeting information back to the soldier on the ground.
One thing being developed is called microclimate clothing. It's a new type of vest that can keep you warm in the winter or cool during the hot weather. One advantage is you have one piece of gear that can serve both in cold or hot weather. It reduces what we have to supply.
And I feel the uniforms at some point will also have a medical capability, whether it's sensors within the uniform or a watch or another piece of technology that can keep other people in the mission chain updated on that person's health and efficiency. Modern soldiers, even conventional soldiers, are being deployed with their own drones, which will provide aerial reconnaissance and also send feeds either from the drone or the soldier back to a central command. I feel it's also important that the individual soldier protective gear, it also has the communications integrated in it. I would like to see those goggles provide a heads-up display, give that soldier every piece of information they need at that point, standing wherever they are on the battlefield, and that soldier can push information out to a central command, pull information from drones, anything flying in the sky.
exoskeleton-enabled suits are being tested and used right now in non-combat situations where operators or soldiers are using it to lift, transport, and load certain items that a human body couldn't handle on its own.
I feel the exoskeletons will be the game changer for the individual soldier on the battlefield.
Tailored should consist of an advanced exoskeleton be worn under an impenetrable body armor that could provide machine-like strength to a soldier, complemented with a computerized network helmet that could increase his tactical awareness. This exoskeleton was, quote, not ready for prime time in a close combat environment, unquote, although developers hoped that some of its features could be applied to future systems. Another remotely operated weapon is the Special Purpose Unmanned Rifle, SPUR, that can not only be used by snipers but also mounted. It has an encrypted wireless and advanced sensor that make it able to shoot accurately up to 1,200 meters in any visibility conditions. This has the potential to turn any ordinary soldier into a sniper.
Roger.
Recently, the U.S. Army has started to test the IVAS, or Integrated Visual Augmented System. That, besides superimposing mixed reality data over the soldier's vision, like 3D terrain maps and vital information on the battlefield, it also helps understand and see through issues like fog and smoke.
Soldiers can also update other units, enabling every soldier to be involved to fulfill their tasks while supporting each other in the most effective way, whilst minimizing casualties.
The software then processes the information that allows the command and control to have a full picture of the situation on the battlefield.
Despite all these advancements, it's becoming really important that we continue to focus on the training and preparation of each individual soldier.
Military schooling is to produce a vast reserve of trained manpower against emergencies.
Going in for the toughest physical training course available.
Integrating the Future Force Modernization Enterprise.
We can get better training for our soldiers and we can do it more efficiently.
Future soldiers may march longer, carry heavier gear, and be more mentally sharp.
Future soldiers will not just have more powerful weapons and techniques. They'll be empowered by real-time battlefield data, enhanced communications, better strategies, and specialized training.
Today we have small groups of soldiers that are cross-trained in different skills. We have much smaller teams specialized across different disciplines, which provides that small element a great advantage.
The idea of having cannon fodder, so to speak, is something that we've largely turned away from.
Even by the time of the Vietnam War, something like only 10% of the U.S. Army in Vietnam was an infantryman. The guy who needs to drive a truck 8 to 12 hours a day to keep the logistics running has to have a different attention span than the guy who's screwing fuses onto artillery shells and throwing artillery shells into the breech of a cannon.
That idea of someone being physically and mentally prepared to fight doesn't just include the physical training, the combined arms training, but also his mental preparedness to fight. His readiness and willingness to defend, his understanding of what he's fighting for, not just the people to the left and the right of him, that traditional thing that holds the warrior formation together, but the values that he's fighting for.
One part I think we missed in my career, I feel it could have made some differences in Iraq, is the psychology of mind, or the performance psychology.
I can see huge amounts of improvement in the behavioral and psychological sciences.
There's programs now, Comprehensive Soldier Fitness Program and a Thor program within Special Forces, Tactical Human Optimization and Repair. It can help with missions on the battlefield, resiliency and adjustment after you come back and redeploy. It could have helped with the transition out of the military.
We are also rethinking the role of a soldier within the armed forces, at least in Western or liberal democracies. Ever since the Second World War, at least, there is now an idea that soldiers should be able to think for themselves and also to be able to question unlawful, immoral commands that they may be given.
In the drive to create enhancements for soldiers and even to enhance soldiers into super soldiers, where do we draw the line?
Every military across time has sought to increase the performance of individual soldiers, whether it's through performance-enhancing drugs or just the issuance of alcohol or tobacco as a stimulant. The idea that some states would conduct potentially gene editing or biological enhancements is not beyond belief. According to a 2019 report, the Chinese military was actively exploring genetic editing in order to create a generation of super soldiers that could resist harsh weather conditions, be immune to pain, and able to fight without the need to rest. Some claim that Russia could also be conducting similar stuff.
This, on top of these technologically advanced weapons, is leading to a Darwinian-type natural selection in that new super soldier.
That will provide future soldiers with the advanced equipment and systems they need to dominate any episode.
Modernization, divestiture, repair site.
Operational camouflage pattern already in use by the Army.
As the Army moves so decisively to remake its modernization process.
To improve uniform development.
With the development of human integrated technology, many have raised the possibility of one day having cyborg soldiers that could artificially be better soldiers and endure adverse situations.
Humans are still the most important part on the battlefield, even more important than technology. But as we progress, I'm waiting for that moment to where that soldier on the battlefield gets that call and he finds out he's getting that autonomous robot that he now has to control and fit into his smart battlefield. I hope they're ready.
No matter what advancements we make, war really comes down to killing as many of the enemy as you can and losing as few of your own people as possible. With the advancement of some of the new technology, we may not even have to employ our guys in the actual battle.
Future Army robots will be among the strongest in the world if visionary researchers have their way.
And a robot is making a big splash in Afghanistan.
Soldiers who can operate them are in demand because they're saving lives on the battlefield.
With features such as 180-degree tilt cameras and flippers that enable them to maneuver over the toughest terrains.
Having a robotic friend ready to keep them safe from harm.
What you're starting to see is units and squads that could have a couple of dozen to a couple hundred members reduce in size. Instead of exposing an operator, a human being, you now have a robot that's your eyes and ears on the tip of the spear or going down a dark hole.
Actually, the idea of replacing humans on a battlefield is not as recent as we may imagine. During the First World War, the French introduced what they called land torpedoes. And in World War II, the Germans had the Goliath and the Soviets the Teletank. In 1972, during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, the British Army introduced the wheelbarrow as the first remote-controlled bomb disposal system. Since then, many bomb and mine disposal squads have used similar robots to dispose of explosive devices at a safe distance, including the Talon system and its armless version, the SOTALON, that would be deployed in the war against terror.
The latest anti-drone technology, a potential tool in the fight against terrorism.
Battalion are training with this high-tech gadget to ensure safer missions for convoys and other ground operations.
This model is ideal for law enforcement surveillance.
I mean, we feel entirely comfortable executing force.
Robots have proven extremely useful in battle, alongside or ahead of soldiers that control them. Their supporting role is only going to grow as tech gets more sophisticated.
In 2007, the Armed Talon and Special Weapons Observation Reconnaissance Detection System, SWORDS, was born. It would become the very first robots to be deployed in a war zone. The first robots were equipped with the M249 light machine gun but were used for surveillance and peacekeeping operations.
The fact that a new semi-autonomous successor for the swords, named MARS, or the Modular Advanced Armed Robotic Systems, was already on the way, only takes lethal action when it receives coded instructions and utilizes its AI.
The pit bull from General Robotics that can detect and track and predict positions of threats and friendlies. The same manufacturer is also developing the Dogo, weighing only 10 kilograms. It can fit in the soldier's backpack and help access places a soldier can't. Armed with a comm system and a 9mm Glock pistol, it can engage as required without exposing the operator.
We also have the development of legged robots. The dog-like Vision 60 can run at up to 10 kilometers an hour for 3 hours in difficult terrains and under hard climatic conditions, carrying heavy equipment. It can provide logistics support or be armed with a remote weapon system. The British MUT, or Multiple Utility Tactical Transport, with full assault weapons and automatic grenade launcher mounts, may evolve into an out-of-the-loop system at some stage in the future.
Our technological advances are offering ever more varied solutions to battlefield problems. A much smaller unit with advanced technology has the ability to employ highly focused lethal power.
Whether or not there's going to be a one-man army, I don't think so. Armies are a lot of things, not just the one guy fighting. Will there be fewer infantrymen? Quite possibly. Will there be fewer armored vehicle crewmen? Almost certainly.
The downside of that is more and more power is falling into the hands of few. So it's going to be important to make sure that the right governance is in place to regulate the actions of the few.
Also, the more we rely on technology, the more we become dependent on it.
I feel I could be classified as an old school Special Forces guy. I grew up in 5th Special Forces Group in the 90s. But here's the thing, the Vietnam era guys taught us, when the tech fails, how do I continue and move forward and continue to engage the enemy?
A warrior is a warrior, with or without his weapons. How are they when it comes down to their primal instinct to survive and fight for each other?
Humans are more important than hardware. I definitely feel today, and even in the future, the human will be the most important part of that battlefield equation.
The idea that somehow technology and technological advances can remove the human from the battlefield and take them out of harm's way, I think is largely an illusion. In the end, it is important to remember that in all likelihood, there will be 18-year-old recruits dying somewhere in muddy fields.
When we're talking about killer robots, we're not talking about science fiction.
The robot policeman is a reality.
Will be added to Army mechanical systems.
Now that we have a relationship with these autonomous robots, it is just amazing.
Machines have been killing people on their own for a while. We just haven't talked about it. A landmine is basically an analog computer. It's got a physical sensor with a little bit of a circuit, and you step on the landmine and blow somebody up. So what we're doing is we're just adding interesting electronics on top of that model.
Fortunately and unfortunately, as we grow towards those autonomous robots on the battlefield, I am a little concerned that there could be communication and control deficiencies between the human and that autonomous device.
As military intelligence meets artificial intelligence, it raises ethical questions regarding how much autonomy robots should have, or whether robots will replace soldiers entirely.
In 2012, Human Rights Watch categorized lethal autonomous weapon systems as falling to 3 categories. A human is in the loop, it's on the loop, or out of the loop. In essence, what that means is when an AI system or an autonomous device that has lethal capabilities makes the decision to kill, is a human being making that final go, no-go decision on taking lethal action.
Human out-of-the-loop systems are mostly defensive in category. Naval systems have always been pushing the boundaries of autonomous weapon deployment. The ability to detect, track, and engage multiple missiles before they hit you is the only way you can defeat threats coming into a ship without being sunk.
Although most of the current systems are not tracking or aiming at other humans, there's plenty of reports that major powers are exploring no humans in the kill chain.
This may have happened already. A UN report dating from 2021 suggests that a logistics convoy was hunted down and remotely engaged by an autonomous weapons system. The report doesn't specify if anyone was killed, but if so, then we have the first human death from a lethal autonomous weapons system.
If other countries go down the path of creating autonomous weapon systems driven by AI, are we at a significant disadvantage?
It's basically a situation that we may not want to build a Terminator, but if the other side does so and we need one to defend ourselves, we will follow suit. And that's exactly this escalatory dynamic of an arms race that is very dangerous and very destabilizing.
Most of the current combat robots all have humans in or on the loop. The South Korean SGR-A1, a robot sentry designed and deployed in a demilitarized zone with North Korea. Its uncooled infrared thermographic camera can detect and identify humans through voice recognition. If the trespasser fails, the system alone can choose whether deploying and sounding an alarm, firing rubber bullets, or deploying more lethal weapons.
Another South Korean system is the Super Eagle Aegis II. It has a warning system and is then programmed to shoot automatically.
When you're in that kind of circumstance, who's to say that those safeguards can't be removed?
You can't hack a gun, you can't hack a sword or a shield or an arrow, but you can hack a drone.
We should carefully consider before we take out that final human check. Sometimes it's just that raw human emotion and instinct that causes you to hesitate when you're ready to pull the trigger on a suspected terrorist. And sometimes that instinct proves right. I myself have entered a building and I was prepared to kill the people I encountered. But as I saw people running inside, something made me stop. Would a machine be able to do that? That's something that we have to consider as we go forward.
One of the challenges is what is called a responsibility gap. If an autonomous or AI-enabled system does something it wasn't so-called told to do, who would take responsibility?
I've been shocked and impressed by the newest form of AI, generative AI, which is a radical advance in its capabilities.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres declared that lethal autonomous weapon systems are politically unacceptable and morally repugnant, and has recommended that its members conclude by 2026 a legally binding instrument to prohibit them.
In the end, things that are technologically possible tend to be developed and they tend to be then used in extreme cases, and war by definition is an extreme case.
As all of our weapon systems become more interrelated, interconnected, we need a good system of morality, laws, and ethics to guide the systems that we create and deploy. We're just a few bad decisions from being there, and although this sounds like sci-fi, that long-term future could be in our immediate future if we're not careful.
You can brainwash somebody, make them such a rabid killer that they're gonna go off and do their own thing. Is that any different than drawing up a computer algorithm? The line is artificial. The line's been artificial for a long time. I mean, it is different, but how different is it?